Rick Pitino worked his portal magic again, and he landed a big-time shooter after a big-time recruiting weekend in Queens. But if you know Rick, he ain't done yet. So let's talk Red Storm recruiting with Zach Braziller, our NCAA basketball host and reporter for the Post. All right, Zach, we know how heavy that Rick Pitino is, how he attacks the portal. Oziyah Sellers, one of the top shooters to enter the transfer portal, is officially coming to Queens. He's the first player to commit from the big recruiting weekend that the Johnnies had this past weekend. So how big of a get was this for Pitino and St. John's, and is he ready for the big city and the bright lights?
Yeah, to me, it's significant. He's a guy who shot 40% from three. We all know that was the team's really Achilles heel last year was shooting. You pair him with Arizona State transfer Josan Sanin, who came I guess about a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago. So now they've brought in two guys who can really shoot the ball and have kind of turned a weakness into a strength. So it's significant. He's not just a shooter. He can put the ball on the floor. He can defend. I've talked to some people about him. He's a really look. He averaged 13.8 a game last year. He's a good player in the ACC. He had some really good schools that tried to get him on campus: Texas, Creighton, Kentucky, Gonzaga. But he loved the trip. He it was his first time ever in New York City. He said it was like the movies. Everything was fast and exciting. First time he'd ever been to the Garden, which he loved. So yeah, it's a good addition. They've now brought in three transfers: him, Sanin, and Providence forward Bryce Hopkins. But like you said, they're not done. They're still going to bring in, I would say, at least two more transfers, and I think there's a chance they're both big names.
Well, on that same recruiting weekend was Cincinnati for Dillon Mitchell, and he's shown a lot of interest. And if you talk to a lot of St. John's fans, he's a guy that they want to have signed here to come play in the big city. So, do you think he's the next one to sign with St. John's?
I think the two big ones. You hear different things about Mitchell. He's obviously a really good defender. He's got size, but I'm not sure how well he fits here because they do have Hopkins and Zuby Ejiofor who are going to start up front. And they still bring back Ruben Prey. The two guys to watch now are Xavier Lee of Princeton, the point guard, and Ian Jackson of North Carolina. He's a Bronx native. They were both visited this weekend. They sit in a really good spot with Jackson. Xavier Lee really feels like St. John's or Florida. But let's start with Jackson. He's a kid who was a top 10 high school prospect, went to Cardinal Hayes in the Bronx. People thought he would be a one and done lottery pick. Didn't have a great year at Carolina, showed some bright spots and could really play, but probably would be back end of the first round. And he's going to come back to school and wants to kind of elevate himself to what he was before his first year of college. And I like where St. John's stands with him. He's visiting Georgia. He took a visit to USC along with St. John's, so that'll be interesting. But to me, the two big names to watch are Xavier Lee and Ian Jackson. If St. John's could get both those guys, I think you're looking at a preseason top five team and an absolutely loaded roster.
All right, Zach Braziller, appreciate you for coming on with the update.
My pleasure.